I got a few like totes to secure and store all of my different tan coat foils, antique finishes. And so to avoid like cross-contamination of paint on paintbrushes, I try and utilize one brush per color. How's it going, everybody? Austin Carter here with Tech on Leather. It is about 4:25 in the morning. We're gonna get this day started. Today, just like the last video, we're going to continue with those wallets. This one's going to focus mainly on my dyeing, painting, oiling, antiquing, finishing process for that. So shouldn't be as long of a video, hopefully, but I hope to just share a bunch of my process. If there's any questions, hopefully this video will clear it up. I have changed my process up some since my last video I posted about my dyeing and painting and antiquing techniques. I have delved more into the oiling side of it, and so that is now a routine part of my process, and I've noticed great benefits. And so I hope you all follow along. I hope you enjoy this video. Leave any questions down in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's get started. All right, before we begin, I'm just going to show you quickly where I work. It's kind of my painting, dyeing, antiquing station. Nothing crazy. It's just kind of the little nook and corner where I get to come do my work separate from everything else. Real quick, I'll go over some of the aspects of that I really like. So as you can tell, it's a small space. I really don't need a whole lot of room, but I got a few like totes to secure and store all of my different tan coat foils, antique finishes, things like that. Kind of got this cardboard box that I utilize to also kind of keep everything compact. And the point of this that I intended was just to, sometimes I stick like open containers in here. Obviously I got my water. Sometimes I'll stick my open oils and stuff like that. It's kind of supposed to be like a safety container so that I don't set it here. I can set it in here, and if there is a spill accidentally, it's kind of collected in here and does not run off into my work. That's the theory. I also kind of cut little slits in it so I can store daubers or my syringes. I'll show you what I use those for in this video. And then just your standard stuff. You know, nothing super crazy. I got this spice rack off of Amazon, and that's where I store all my paints and dyes. And then just some small shelving and holders for paints, glues, different things like that. So all in all, nothing super crazy, but I thought I'd just show y'all. All right, so we're gonna get started with a couple wallets. So I'm not gonna show all the wallets, obviously. It's just, they're basically a lot of the same. Going with a dark brown, painted letters, antiqued. So nothing crazy, but I'm going to show you two types of ways that I found that work well for me for painting, or I'm sorry, dyeing the like the main borders of the wallets. This is going to be kind of like a two-tone, so this will be natural, painted, all that stuff. Okay, so anyhow, you have your normal paintbrush, which you can paint around here, but I also will be utilizing just your normal Q-tip. And to me, this works the fastest, but I'm going to show you both methods. But I really like this method. It's pretty quick. You have to be a little bit more careful just so you don't accidentally kind of get into your tooling. But when you tilt your project, you can avoid such mishaps. All right, so we'll get started with that. All right, so we're using a Fiebings dark brown. A lot of times I use the cap as my container that I use from. And so I have this 1cc syringe that I'll use to draw up some dye. And to me, this is like one of the cleanest methods. I used to just pour it out into the container, but it would just run all down there and just get super dirty. And I can kind of stick that right there. Keep some shop towels close by. And so this is where, I'd stick this in here while I'm using it, keep it away from my work, and we can continue. We're going to come in here, I load up the paintbrush, and I always just kind of tend to start from one corner and just go down. I work all the way around, and then I'll do the middle. Another tip, I always kind of keep my dye or paint away from me and not like right here, just in case if I accidentally bump it, you're bumping it away from your project and not towards your project. You can avoid a lot of unfortunate mishaps that way. I'll move on to the middle section. Make sure, especially on these bifold wallets, you get a large amount of dye in the center crease section, because this is going to be what bends a lot. And as the leather bends, if you don't have a lot of great penetration, if you have like a lighter layer of dye, as you bend it, it will lighten up. And so you want to make sure you hit this area pretty heavily so that you can maintain as much of that color as possible. So I load it up nice and thick. All right, so that's that one finished. Now I'm going to use the Q-tip method. So just kind of roll the Q-tip in there. And as you get close to the edge, just kind of tilt up your project into you. And then just nice and easy come back. One, this Q-tip holds a lot more dye than the paintbrush, and so I have to go back and forth way less. And then because of its size, I can still get up into the tight areas of the border and not really worry about getting the dye on the project. So you can guide it pretty easily. I've also noticed I have to go back less to do like second and third coats with this because it lays down so much dye, which helps out a lot in just saving time and getting projects done faster. Okay, so finish up this middle section. Because this project was small, I'd go back and forth a lot more. A lot of people say, oh, do small circles, but it's such a small area of dye that you're using, it doesn't really matter. All right, finished. I feel like that was about a quarter of the time I spent using a paintbrush. So now we can get to painting the letters. All right, so another quick tip is sometimes I use a little piece of scrap leather, just this is like 2 ounce, to use to put my acrylic paint on if I'm not going straight out of the container. For this one, this is kind of like a squeeze bottle. And so what I'll do is I'll just add about what I think I need on there to use as a little tray. And then, so once I'm done, I can dispose of it. Or if I want to see what the color will look like, or if I want to see how something's going to paint or lay on the leather, I can kind of test it out on a piece of leather, see how many layers something might need. So just a little paint tray as I work. With most of these acrylics, you're going to need to lay down several layers. Certain colors require more layers than others. I don't know why. It's probably just the chemical makeup of the color. But I find like darker colors, such as blacks and reds and blues, for some reason, tend to use less layers. This will need several layers. And so let's just get this thing painted. One reason you want to build up these layers, so we can talk a little bit about, well, why I do this. Obviously aesthetics, you know, one layer with this color looks awful, real blotchy. But if you, even kind of with your colors that look pretty good with your initial paint job, you want to build up layers because you want to avoid any paint wipe away when it comes time to lay down your sealer or oil or antique, because you are rubbing on and rubbing off those materials. And so if the paint is not adhering to the leather as it should, and you're not getting enough penetration into the fibers, you will lift off some of that paint. And so you're going to have sections where it'll return to its natural leather state and does not look super appealing. And so if you can add on a few layers, you can avoid that and your project will look really crisp and clean. So with this one, I bet you we're going to be doing about 3 or 4. And to me, like the more layers you put on, the less blotchy it looks. For me, I don't know if it's, I mean, I'm sure it's a thing, but I always try and go the same direction with my paintbrush, running this way and not just going all which ways. Guess how you kind of like paint a wall. You want to go up and down. You're not really trying to go crazy with it everywhere. Looking for uniformity is what I'm trying to say. Did 3 coats of purple on this one, so I'm going to let that completely dry before I oil. And now I'm going to move on to the next letter. All right, moving on to my next letter. This one's going to be black. Before I move on, I'm going to show you kind of just a quick tip that I do with my paintbrushes. So I've got this nifty little paintbrush holder right here. And so to avoid like cross-contamination of paint on paintbrushes, I try and utilize one brush per color. So what I do when I get a new paintbrush is I'll just dip the end of it in the color that it will be. And so here you got my black, yellow, white, blue, all that stuff. And so as I progress, I will just dip it into the paint, let it dry, and I will only use that paintbrush for that color. So hope that helps. Still use a cap as my painting tray. You can probably tell how well this paint goes on, this color goes on, as opposed to the purple. It's much more uniform, but we'll still do several layers just in case, just so we don't have any wipe away when we antique it and add our layers on. Moving on to the next portion of the process. This paint is pretty well dry, so we're going to oil it and let that sit. All right, what I'm using today is just pure neatsfoot oil. I picked this up from Murdoch's. Go ahead and apply this on pretty liberally. What I'm looking for is just to get a consistent layer of oil. I don't want it too blotchy. You'll notice how the dark brown really got tied together by that oil. And so we'll let that sit and basically let it dry completely. All right, we've pulled out the wallets from the fan dryer. It's probably about 2.5 hours or so, but they're at an evenness that I like. So I'm going to go ahead and apply Resolene by Fiebings, and we'll get that protective sealer on so that we can antique it. So there's a lot of big bubbles on there. I just kind of lightly wipe them off and then set off to the side to dry. Make sure you work it down deep in those cracks and crevices. Just lightly wipe off those bubbles. All right. We'll let those sit and dry real quick. About 10 minutes later, and just like that, it's all dried out. You can tell it has a nice protective sheen on it. Time to get antiquing. I'm going to be using a dark brown Fiebings antique finish. And something I kind of switched over to using are these sponges. These are this, you can find, they were large sponges. I got it from Dollar General. They're, I think, literally $1 a piece. And then I just chopped them up into little sizes like this. But they're pretty soft, and it's actually really good. It's a really good sponge to wipe on and wipe off your antique. And so I'm going to show you how I use these today. Should just need one. I used to use paper towels to wipe off my antique, but they just aren't really soft, and it tended to just leave too much antique on the project. So I'm just using a dauber because I had it in there already. I'm just gonna little circles, fill in all the spaces. All right, so you take your sponge and you just start wiping everything off. All right, so there you see you got a really nice, even application of antique. Moving on. All right, and while the antique is still wet, I'm going to go back with the Resolene and go right back over it. And this kind of locks in everything. So it's going to be a quick layer of Resolene over the top. You're going to wipe that off almost immediately, and then it's just to kind of pull off any type of residual antique. So I'll use a clean sponge now. See, you're still getting some of that grime off there. Beautiful. Now we'll let that dry completely. So at this point, we just let this completely dry. And then from there, we can really start working on interiors and getting this prepped for completion. That will be in the next video. Y'all, that'll do it for this video. I really appreciate y'all for sticking around. Hope y'all learned something new. All right, guys, and as always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I guess now hype. Click the hype button down there. I don't know. My wife told me about it. It's new, I guess, on YouTube. So click that. We'll see what happens. I really appreciate y'all. As always, have a great day.